What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Braun Bafflestone. So today we are having another episode of my Deep Dive series, this time looking at the Battlemaster. This is the second of my 3-video segment on the Battlemaster as part of my larger 28-part fighter series. And yesterday we did a review and rating series to get an overview. Today we are diving deep to find optimization leverage points. And tomorrow I'm going to be putting it all together with a character build series where I create a Battlemaster levels 1 through 20. So before we begin, I want to mention that I have a Patreon now, and it is hugely motivating to have patrons and makes me want to do a great job for you guys. So thank you so much, and if you want to support the channel, please check it out. And without further ado, let's dive into this Battlemaster because we got a lot of maneuvers to cover. So a few general notes to begin. The versatility for a fighter is elite with the Battlemaster. This was the first fighter analysis that I've done that has involved a significant amount of complexity, much like casters, and that made it pretty fun. I had to group them and slice them up in multiple ways to get a full sense of their abilities, strengths, and weaknesses, and how they fit together, and how you might need to think about them as part of a progression in actually playing a Battlemaster. And in fact, it's so complex that I found a lot of bad conventional wisdom in this space. So this is going to be interesting to actually parse them all out. The Battlemaster is front-loaded, so it makes for an excellent dip. And it offers the best gameplay in Tier 1 and 2. It doesn't age well, so you may want to consider an archetype change or dipping at or after level 11 when you get that extra attack. The Battlemaster can apply their superiority die to every attack on their turn, including on their reaction. And it is, of course, ideal to proc the superiority die on a critical so you can gain extra damage. This is one of the funner archetypes to play out of the fighter class due to its versatility and control options, makes you think about what you're going to do from round to round. And for the Battlemaster, the martial adept feat and superior fighting technique fighting styles are particularly viable. I don't really like them too much if you're not a Battlemaster, but if you are a Battlemaster, it's got some nice synergy because the die size of it will increase to D10 when you get improved combat superiority at level 10, and this is as per Jeremy Crawford. And it's just these are just so much better when you're adding to an existing pool of superiority dice that allows you some sustainability, and it's so much better when you're rounding out a pre-existing menu of combat options because you are going to have several holes if you only have one or two. They're going to be very situational. So I think these feats, or this feat and fighting style, work really nicely with the Battlemaster. And the Battlemaster does get a solid progression of its uses, presuming at least one short rest. If you get no short rests, they might have some trouble. But as you can see by the chart where I compare them to other fighter archetypes with a similar approach to powers, they hold up pretty well, especially in tiers 1 and 2. So now let's jump into the maneuvers, and we are going to be doing these alphabetically, except that I have grouped them by action economy. So we are first going to look at the maneuvers that proc on a hit and do not require your bonus action or reaction. Starting with Disarming Attack. Use your superiority die to force a strength save or disarm the target. This is one that does add the superiority dice in damage. They don't all do so, so I've called it out in blue to make it easy to follow. The strength save is annoying, but if it goes off, it can have a devastating impact when facing a fearsome weapon or item. It's not just restricted to weapons. You can disarm a shield, a spell focus, a component bag, a magic spell book, any kind of MacGuffin. So if they are holding an item in their hands that is having a significant impact on the battle, you can get rid of that. However, there aren't very many monsters in 5th edition that actually carry weapons. So this is quite situational, and in fact, probably isn't going to be applicable in very many situations. And you do need to discuss with your DM just how easy it is to interact with the dropped weapon. The weapon falls at the feet of the enemy, so it's in the same space. And rules as written, one can just use their interact with object to grab it or kick it away if it's within reach. But if it's done from range, you are going to need to coordinate with a party member or a summon to pick it up or otherwise, get rid of that weapon or item. The Wizard's Familiar can be a good option for this, or the Psy Warrior's telekinetic movement. But some DMs might find this unrealistic and make it difficult on the grounds that they're in that space and they control that space, so why should you just get to interact with an object in that space? Some DMs might allow for an opportunity attack in that situation, for example. So discuss it in advance to figure out how that's going to work, because that will affect whether you want to take this maneuver or not. It is better than the standard disarm attack. First of all, that standard disarm attack is an optional rule. The DM may choose to ignore it, and this is baked into the class, so that's better. And the standard disarm is an opposed check between the attack roll and the athletics acrobatics check, whereas disarming attack is triggered on a hit, which does damage, and then imposes the strength save. Also, the standard disarm means that if they have two hands on the item, you roll at disadvantage, and that is not an issue with disarming attack. Overall, I give this an average. It can have a high impact when you can use it, but most of the time you're not going to be able to because they're not going to be using a weapon or an item. So next we have Distracting Strike. It allows you to use your superiority die to grant an ally advantage on their next attack. It does add the superiority die damage to your attack, and this can enable sneak attack if a rogue needs to pull that off. However, it only allows for one attack at advantage. I find that inferior to the trip attack, which is going to knock them prone. That will allow all of your party members to attack at advantage. However, it does still retain some benefit if you are enabling a ranged sneak attack, but overall, I still rate this a poor. Next, we have Goading Attack. Use your superiority die to force a wisdom save versus disadvantage against attacking your allies. And this will add the superiority damage to your attack roll. The wisdom save is annoying. And generally, this effect is suboptimal relative to alternatives like Menacing Attack. Menacing Attack has the same effect through its fear, but it also includes you, and it adds a mobility penalty where they can't get any closer to you. So in a vacuum, Menacing Attack is better. However, Goading Attack is effective against enemies that are immune to fear, so situationally better, because nothing is immune to Goading Attack, and as you get higher in levels, there will be a lot of things immune to fear. The Goading Attack is most effective from ranged versus an enemy that is engaged with an ally, since it doesn't affect you, and it doesn't require sight, unlike Menacing Attack, because fear effects require line of sight. So this is good in heavy obscurement versus an enemy with blind sight or some such. And so Goading Attack gets a multiple rating. It is poor in tier 1 and 2 when Menacing Attack is clearly superior. It is average if you are a melee attacker in tier 3 and 4 when Menacing Attack is often useless due to immunity. And it is good if you are a ranged attacker in tier 3 and 4. Next we have Lunging Attack. Use the superiority die to gain a plus 5-foot reach. It does add the damage to the attack. It can enhance the kiting tactic by letting you hit them and you can then disengage without having an opportunity attack. But it's problematic in that it only affects one attack. And there is some resonance with Brace, but that's not a good thing because you're not going to want to devote two of these maneuvers to one combo, are you? I would hope not. So I give Lunging Attack a rating of poor. Next we have Maneuvering Attack. Use your superiority die to grant an ally using their reaction an ability to use half their move without incurring an opportunity attack. And this will add your superiority die to the damage, and it does require your ally's reaction. However, out of turn movement is pretty rare in 5th edition, and it doesn't require sight as long as they can hear you, which I think is important. And combat position is sneaky important. Getting squishy allies out of harm's way is extremely valuable when necessary. There's no opportunity attack, so you can reposition allies out of melee. But note, you can also take allies out of the area of effect of things that proc at the start of their turn, like a cloud kill. I personally have faced lots of cloud kill. I would have loved a battle master on the field to take me or my allies out of it before it can blast you with that huge damage. Moving your allies can also set up flanking, and it can also be useful if you're guarding an NPC or some such, and you can keep them safe. Overall, I am a huge fan of maneuverability options in this game, and particularly for fighters, so I give Maneuvering Attack a rating of superior. Next we have Menacing Attack. Use the superiority die to force a wisdom save versus fear. It will add the damage to your attack, and the wisdom save is annoying, but fear is a deadly condition that forces attacks and checks at disadvantage, and they can't get any closer to you. So not only does this blunt their offense by forcing them to attack at disadvantage, but it makes them vulnerable to grapples and shoves because their checks are also at disadvantage. So this is a pretty rare and excellent control option for fighters. However, many stronger creatures are immune to the frighten condition, so it is better in lower tiers. Fear condition also requires line of sight, so negative synergy with heavy obscurement. And there is nice synergy with Polearm Master as a quasi-sentinel effect, because if they enter your reach and trigger your reaction Polearm Master attack, you can pump Menacing Attack through it, and if it sticks, then they can't get any closer to you. Overall, I find Menacing Attack pretty impressive and give it a rating of good. Next we have Precision Attack. Add your superiority die to the attack roll after the roll, but before determining the hit. So, fantastic synergy with Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master, which results in superior DPR, baseline DPR, really strong, consistent damage. But it must have those feats or it is much less impressive, although it will stack with similar effects like Bless and Bardic Inspiration, so you can really get that Sharpshooter Great Weapon Master working if you stack it with something. It also has great synergy with dip abilities that are dependent on hitting, like Sneak Attack and Assassinate and Stunning Strike and Inflict Wounds, and like lots and lots of them. Mathematically, I recommend activating it only when you're 1 or 2 points away from successfully making the hit, because it only procs on a miss, and if you don't bump it up high enough to make it a hit, you can lose the superiority die with no effect. So that's something of a knock, but regardless, the synergies with Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master are so strong and are so critical to so many builds that I give this a rating of superior if you have Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master, and average otherwise. Next we have Pushing Attack. Use your superiority die to impose a strength save versus a 15-foot push if they are large or smaller. This will add the superiority die damage to your attack, and it only pushes away from you, which makes sense, but needs to be called out because something like Crusher can push them towards you, which doesn't make much sense, but so it is. And of course, the push can be situationally useful. It's excellent with ally caster area of effects or environmental hazards, push them off a cliff or push them into the cloud kill. And it can create disengages, and it makes you good at kiting. Also, interesting synergy with the Polearm Master reaction attack. You can push them out of the range and maybe they can't get to you. A little bit redundant with the shove attack, but it is better and it will add damage. So I give Pushing Attack a rating of good if you have Polearm Master or strong party synergy and no one else can push. Otherwise, it's poor because pushing attacks are something that you really need to combo with something else your party is doing. Next, we have Sweeping Attack. Use a superiority die to apply the attack roll to a second adjacent enemy, and then you'll do the damage to them. Creates no additional effect except the extra damage, just spreads it out. I find this inferior. Next is Trip Attack. Use the superiority die to impose a strength save versus going prone. If they are large or smaller, it will add the dice damage to the attack. And the strength save is annoying, but prone is a fantastic condition to impose. It allows melee attacks from your entire party at advantage until the enemy can get up, And it is fantastic against flying creatures because that will make them fall and also inflict falling damage, and then you can dogpile them or grapple them and then they can't get back up in the air. And in fact, just generally speaking, it's a great party combo to use where allies then pile on grapple or melee attacks. Also has nice synergy with Polearm Master or the Sentinel reaction attack if the enemy has used half their move, because once they're on the ground, it'll take them half their move to get up, and if they don't have that available, then they can't. And so this just has a huge impact. I consider it a must-have and give it a rating of superior. So those are all of the maneuvers that proc on a hit and do not require your bonus action or reaction. Now we are going to look at effects that proc on an attack or a hit, but also require your bonus action. First up is Commander's Strike. Use a superiority die plus 1 attack to grant your ally a reaction attack. So it will do the extra damage if the attack hits, and it doesn't require you to hit, but you must be taking the attack action, and it does consume one of your attacks, and it consumes your ally's reaction, and it consumes your bonus action. So the opportunity cost of your bonus action attack is very high if you have Polearm Master or Crossbow Expert or 2-weapon fighting or something. And so you're sacrificing 2 attacks to give an ally 1. That is only useful if the ally's attack is significantly superior to yours. For example, it can allow the rogue to do 2 sneak attacks in the same round. It can be okay if you have a T-Rex on the field with its elite bite attack, and it can be okay with Summon Greater Demon with a Chasme and its vicious Proboscis attack. But it's really going to take an impressive attack to make this valuable relative to the opportunity cost. It does have a massive line of sight range, so I guess you could use it to impact a battle that you're really far away from and otherwise couldn't. But it only procs the attack, and so if they miss, you lose the superiority die and there's no effect for it. So I'm not impressed with Commander's Strike. I give it a rating of poor if you have Polearm Master, Crossbow Expert, or 2-weapon fighting, and an average if otherwise, and the party synergy provides a sufficiently powerful attack to proc. That's pretty situational. I don't see taking Commander's Strike too often. There's one other maneuver that procs on an attack or hit and also requires your bonus action, and that is Grappling Strike. Use your superiority die on a melee attack for a bonus action grapple, which adds the die roll to the athletics roll. So you can't use it with ranged attack, which is kind of a downer, and the bonus action is a huge opportunity cost for most fighter builds. Although that said, grapple otherwise would still cost an attack as well, so that's kind of a wash. And grapple can be very powerful as part of a party combo, so it might be worth it. If they are prone, if they are silenced, if they are in a persistent area of effect, grappling them is pretty sweet. Now note, it only procs the attack, so you can lose the superiority die with no effect if the attack is missed. However, you're almost certain to land this because you already tend to have a pretty big advantage over monsters if you have athletic proficiency at that sort of thing. So to stack the superiority die on top of that means that you are almost certainly going to grapple them. So I give this a rating of good if you are a melee fighter, and it's inferior if you're a ranged attacker because it's not going to work. Next we have maneuvers that call only for a bonus action. First up is Feinting Attack. Use your superiority die and the bonus action to get advantage on your next attack. It will add the superiority die damage if you hit, but the bonus action is a huge opportunity cost for many, if not most, fighter builds. It applies only to your next attack roll, so no help to your allies. You have to be within 5 feet of the target, so it won't work with ranged attacks, and it only allows for 1 attack at advantage. I find that inferior relative to the trip attack, because the prone of trip attack means that all attacks are at advantage until the enemy's turn. So all of your attacks and all of your allies' attacks, relative to just 1 attack, that makes Feinting Attack pretty bad. And then on top of that, you have to proc this before the attack, so you can lose your superiority die with no effect if the attack is missed. I'm not impressed at all. I give Feinting Attack a rating of inferior. Next we have Quick Toss. Use your superiority die and a bonus action to make a throwing attack. and it will add the damage if you hit. But again, bonus action is a huge opportunity cost for many, if not most, fighter builds, and it adds nothing else to typical throwing weapons because you actually can already throw a weapon as a bonus action. You still require a free hand and an interact with object to draw the weapon, unless you have the throwing fighting style. So in most cases, quick toss isn't that impressive to me. I mean, you might want to stick it on a dedicated throwing build, although I really don't see that it gives you a great tactical advantage. However, it is interesting with a net. Now, the net is suboptimal in Tier 2 Plus when using an action because it will consume all your attacks, and you have extra attack in Tier 2, which means that offloading it to a bonus action is pretty good. That allows you to use your extra attack on your action, and you can use the net on your bonus action. And if you combo this with Crossbow Expert, now you've eliminated the range penalty. Now, you can't add damage to nets, according to Jeremy Crawford, but check with your DM, maybe you can. And you do have to proc this before the attack, so you could lose your superiority die with no effect if the attack is missed. But I still think that if you are going to want to use a net, you pretty much need the quick toss maneuver to make that happen. So I could see it if you're trying to roleplay a particular build. However, normally I would give this a rating of poor and only average if you have Crossbow Expert and a net. Next we have Rally. Use your superiority die and a bonus action to give an ally the superiority die plus your charisma modifier, temporary HP. So this is charisma based, which is likely to be a dump stat on your fighter. You'll be lucky if it's not -1. Regardless, the temporary hit point mechanics make this sneaky powerful. And I want to mention, every single resource that I found rates this badly. I did a lot of research for this video, and a lot of people ranking and talking about battle maneuvers, and they all hate Rally. And guess what? They're all wrong. Why? Because temporary hit points last until your next long rest. So think about it, guys. The Battlemaster can use all of their superiority die right after a long rest to confer temporary HP to the entire party that's going to last all day long. And then immediately after the long rest, you take another short rest, and you will gain all your superiority dice back, which literally means all that happens in terms of gameplay is that you have extended the duration of your long rest from 8 hours to 9 hours. In 99% of campaigns, that is going to make no difference whatsoever, and that means you basically get free temporary hit points at no cost to you, except for the versatility. Also, if you have any superiority dice remaining right before a short rest, you can just dump them into temporary hit points for your party members, and then you're just going to get them back an hour later. So despite everyone thinking that Rally is bad, it is in fact an elite option that confers a powerful effect at almost no opportunity cost except the versatility. This example shows very clearly the difference between opportunity cost analysis that takes into account action economy and how you actually play the game versus a shallow analysis that looks only at the effects. Guys, I am an economist. We are trained to see what cannot be seen, and we are trained to see the effects on the margin. That's why I get paid the big bucks, I guess. In any case, Rally is amazing, and I give it a rating of superior, and I am 100% taking Rally on my build when I put together a Battlemaster tomorrow. Next, we have maneuvers that provide the Battlemaster a reaction. First, we have Brace. Use the superiority die to get a reaction attack when a visible enemy enters your reach, and it will add the superiority die to the damage if it hits. The reaction attack must be a melee attack, however, so no good with ranged, and because it's when they enter your reach, you can't use it when you're initiating the offense. It's situational for when you are attacked only. It also replicates one of the Polearm Master riders, so negative synergy if you have Polearm Master. And check with the DM, but rules as written, it doesn't require willing movement, so technically you could proc it with a push effect, and then gain a reaction attack while the enemy is already within reach. Right, so for example, if you use Crusher and then push them out of your reach on one hit, and then on the second hit use a lunge attack and Crusher to push them back into your reach, that would proc this reaction brace attack. So you could pull all that off in one turn. And if you do, it's only a single attack, so the heavier the weapon, the better. But you must proc this before the attack, so you could lose the superiority die with no effect if the attack is missed. I'm not impressed with Brace. I give it a rating of poor if you're a melee character and inferior if you are ranged. Next reaction available is Parry. Use your superiority die and reaction when you're hit to reduce the damage. It only works against melee attacks, so is ineffective versus ranged. However, it is based on dexterity, so a little bit of negative synergy there, although your dex is probably going to be pretty good, even as a strength-based fighter. So this is good for managing concentration or effects that end with damage, like spells that you're concentrating on or Armor of Agathis. So it can be interesting for builds with this or as a Caster Dip. The Bladesinger is particularly intriguing off the top of my head. But in any case, Parry is better at the lower tiers because it doesn't scale well into higher CRs where monster attacks can get pretty crazy high. But it is the only viable reaction maneuver available for ranged battle masters. But nonetheless, I'm still not too impressed with Parry. I give it a rating of poor if you are a ranged battle master with concentration or temporary hit point abilities and a dex build, and inferior otherwise. The final reaction available to battle masters is Riposte. Use your superiority die and reaction for a melee attack. It will add the dice damage if you hit. Note that it only procs versus melee attacks, and the reaction attack must also be a melee attack, so this isn't going to work if you are ranged. And it's similar to Brace, but it has better situational value. Recall that Brace procced when something entered your reach, whereas this procs if something misses you an attack. So this proc condition is just going to come up more times per battle relative to Brace. It also offers better synergy with Polearm Master than Brace does, because Brace clogs with Polearm Master. Like Brace, it's only a single attack, so the heavier the weapon, the better. And note that Jeremy Crawford says that this reaction attack can't stack with another maneuver. Like you couldn't put a pushing attack on top of this Riposte, but ask your DM. And note that, again, you must proc before the attack, so you can lose the superiority die with no effect if the attack is missed. People out there tend to like Riposte. I'm not so impressed. I give it a rating of average for melee and inferior for ranged, because while it's nice to be able to use that reaction attack, it's only nice. Nice is average. It's better if you get a guaranteed effect out of your superiority dice. So I would be very hard pressed to use one of them on a Riposte, which kind of sucks because there's only 3 reactions available to battle masters and none of them are really any good. Finally, we have some maneuvers that only require free actions. First up is Ambush. Add the superiority die to your initiative or stealth check. And this is pretty sweet because Dex is likely to be a good stat on fighters, and being able to bump your initiative is sneaky good. Winning initiative is very important in this game. As well, the stealth bump actually matters in many cases as well, so it's not bad. I give it a rating of average. Next we have Bait and Switch. Use a superiority die to swap positions with an adjacent willing creature, and then add the die roll to either of your AC. Not viable for ranged attacks, and it's not quite a free action because it does require 5 feet of movement, and it can only be used on your turn, and it's just extremely situational. I mean, it can remove an ally from a choke point, but you can do that with Maneuvering Attack, and it's just way more applicable. I will say the AC bump is very strong in bounded accuracy, but the situationality of it makes me unimpressed with it, and I give it a rating of poor. Then we have Commanding Presence. Add the die roll to your Intimidation, Performance, or Persuasion checks. I don't like this at all. Charisma is likely to be a dump stat on a fighter. Adding skills is a waste when you only have limited maneuvers and aren't going to be able to take all the combat ones that you want. So this isn't the sort of maneuver that a power gamer should be interested in. Next we have Evasive Footwork. Add the superiority die to your AC while moving until you first stop moving, And so this is a somewhat risky way to disengage relative to the disengage action or pushing attack or shoving, but it will allow the Battle Master to retain their action for attacking, and sometimes you want to do that. But be aware, it only lasts until the end of your move, and you can't break up your movement, so you can't move and then attack and then move again and expect the AC bonus to continue, because it won't. It'll stop as soon as you make that attack. So I'm not that impressed with Evasive Footwork. I give it a rating of poor. Next we have Tactical Assessment, where you add the die roll to your investigation history or insight checks. And again, I'm not impressed because intelligence and wisdom are likely to be dump stats on a fighter. And again, the skill bump is just a waste when you already have limited maneuvers. So I give it a rating of inferior. So those are all the maneuvers. And finally, for your convenience, I have grouped them in two different ways. First, we have grouped them by action economy. So you can kind of pick through them and decide what you want based on whether they use up your bonus attack and stuff, because you don't want to clog or anything. And finally, I have grouped them by rating, just so that you can get a sense of how I distribute the value of the powers. And as you can see, I have 4 in my superior category: Maneuvering Attack, Precision Attack, Rally, and Trip Attack. So you might have a good idea of what direction I'm going to be going tomorrow when I present my character build for Bill Braun Battlemaster. So that's it. That's my analysis of the battle maneuvers. And I know there are some hot takes in there and that some people are going to want to disagree, but I stand by my ratings. I've done a lot of research here and I feel like I've got a pretty strong sense of how good these are. So let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree and we can talk it out. And regardless, thank you so much for watching. Please tune in next time when I put it all together for my character build series and roll out Bill Braun Battlemaster. And I'll see you next time.